Hi, I'm Jamie Rose. I'm a performance coach, and I also teach a system of motivational techniques called the Tools. The Tools were created by Phil Stutz, and you can read more about them in the books The Tools and Coming Alive, written by Phil and his colleague, Barry Michaels. Phil and I usually give workshops and webinars throughout the year, but right now we're working on a new book of his work. So we kind of miss you guys. I thought it would be nice for us to do some little video chats. So with no further ado, here is Phil joining us via Zoom. Hi, Phil.
Hi, Jamie. I'm kind of excited to talk about this because time is something that is rarely discussed in any kind of a constructive way. So I have some ways of looking at it. Maybe that'll be helpful for people. I think it will.
Yeah, I think this is a fascinating topic. So today we're talking about time. Phil sent me a piece he wrote many, many years ago, and it really resonated with me, and I think it will with you too. In this piece that Phil sent me, he talks about how we feel like we don't have enough time these days. There's never enough time. We're impatient. If we are at a red light, we're anxious for it to change. We're kind of in this rat race relationship to time, and our technology, even though it had the promise of making things easier, it in fact dominates us, and our cell phone, our computer, our Zoom meetings become these sort of dictators in charge of us. So then and Phil in this piece contrasts that with the ancient world and in its relationship to time, where time was much more sacred. So I'd love you to talk a little bit about that, Phil.
Yeah. In general, I view that there's a war going on. And one way to think of the war is a mechanical view of human beings and of how we live versus a spiritual view. In the mechanical view, everything is up for sale and nothing is sacred. And we believe egotistically that we can control everything, basically. And what happens is the more we believe that, we don't show time the respect that it deserves. And as a result, we also don't show the earth the respect it deserves. And as a result, the earth is on the verge of falling apart altogether. So the way I like to think of it is anything, and this is helpful just as an overview, electronics connected with it in any way, shape, or form is subject to corruption, would be the right way to. What does that mean? Corruption means you think you can skip steps. And that's because of the culture, money has to do with that. You can hire somebody to do it, or you can somehow subvert the process of living. Now, in the ancient world, the process of living was dictated by forces way beyond the control of the individual. Just a simplistic way to think about it is the seasons themselves. That was okay with human beings because they felt that was part of the spiritual environment, which is another difference between now and then, which is they didn't have the separation between what was spiritual and what was material.
Right.
We do.
In this, you talked about three concepts: submission, commitment, and patience. And these three concepts are the way we can honor time.
Yeah, we'll go in order. So submission basically has to do with your ego. So the ego wants what it wants when it wants it, which is but that's its goal, basically. And along with that is I call it insatiability, which is, so the ego, there's always one more thing that's out there that you can't afford to miss. And for most people, the worst thing is missing things, and then they feel like they're left behind, so to speak. And the human ego is, instead of looking at this insatiability as a problem, the ego is actually proud of it. In other words, the conceit that we have is we can use every second in the pursuit of basically addictions, is what it amounts to. And And the ego looks down on people who have self-restraint. It's like if one piece of cake is good, 6 pieces is better. You have a smartphone that works, but there's one that's better, it's bigger, whatever it is. So, and what this does is, and by the way, if you don't keep up with this acquisitional, addictive, possessive mindset, the society actually makes you feel like a loser. Mm-hmm. Surprisingly enough, the winner is the person who never feels that they have enough. And that's ridiculous. The first part of the solution has to do with distraction. Okay, so people are unable to, not everybody, but most people have difficulty staying focused and staying concentrating on one thing, whether it's a train of thought, whether it's something they're speaking about, whether it's concentrating on a problem, whatever it is. And the phone is I call it the distractor in chief, because it's fantastically convenient, but demonically addictive. That's why I put it. Fantastically convenient, but demonically addictive. So the convenience itself, the availability of something tends to make you addicted to it, whether you need it or not. It's just that it's available. That's why there's always a bigger, better phone or whatever it is, whatever the mechanical thing is, computer. You can tell if you're in a room with like a meeting or something in person, as quaint as that may seem at this point, and everyone's got their phone out in front of them, and there could be a fire in the next room and nobody would even have a reaction to it. But if one of those phones gets its ringtone, people will jump like they're jumping out of their skin to answer it. It's almost like we've taken God and taken him out of the higher world, so to speak, and put him into the cell phone. So
it's terrifying. In this paper, you talk about submission, and you talk about submission of the ego. So what does the submission of the ego have to do with what you just talked about?
Basically, submission means you have to submit to not getting what you want, in effect. The vehicle, the modality of submission is discipline. So it takes discipline not to be distracted by whatever it is that's distracting you, these addictive things. And discipline, the way I define discipline is it's the correct relationship to time. Submission means I'm distracted. There's something I want. I want another phone call, a different conversation. I want a piece of candy, and you can resist those cravings or whatever it is that's distracting you from what you're supposed to be doing. And it's amazing. I treat a lot of executives and people in positions of authority, and I would say a good half of them can't focus. They can maybe focus for 90 seconds, and then they're back. They're conquered by their own desires. Is probably a good way to say. So it's a feeling of submission when you restrain yourself from what it is that you want, and that's called self-restraint. If you think of time as sacred somehow, then it becomes easier not to let yourself be distracted, because it's not just a matter of convenience or efficiency. Time is a great gift. The fact that you're alive is a great gift, and it's like, if you have a sense of purpose and a sense of mission, then ostensibly most of what you're doing is to serve that. And what you're doing is you're acknowledging that you didn't create time, you can't control time. You have to co-create in time. You have to accept time as something outside of your control. And the most efficient way to deal with it is as if it's sacred.
The thing is, you said treat time as if it's sacred, when in fact it is. I mean, we only have a finite amount. I mean, it's not like, oh, we have to pretend it's sacred. It is so sacred, it's for sure going to run out for all of us. To keep this short, I mean, there's so much to say about that. And one of the things I love about the tools, Phil talked about self-restraint and submission. There's a lot of tools, these short sort of meditations that can help us enact that concept. So you also talked about commitment in this paper, and you also talked about patience. And I want to give some time into both those concepts as well.
Yeah, okay, so commitment is the easiest thing to understand. Here's how you build up commitment. Commitment is very specific. Commitment is a state of mind or a state of functioning in which you make a promise to yourself about something you're going to do, and then you keep that promise. Let's say you commit to working out tomorrow morning at 10. If you make that promise, you have to keep it, and you want to keep it as precisely as you can. If you say you want to work out at 10, don't show up at 11, show up at 10. And the reason, and people say, well, what's the difference? I get in the workout anyway. It's because that doesn't form a good relationship with yourself. The genesis of being confident is that when you make a commitment to yourself, you keep the commitment, even if it's stupid, like just showing up at 10 instead of 10:15. You start to trust yourself, and you start to believe that you will keep your commitments in general. Now, there's nothing sacred or special about 10 o'clock in the morning particularly, but yet it can be part of a sacred process. And the reason is if you're working out at 10 in the morning, but your commitment was yesterday, then when you enter the gym at 10 o'clock in the morning, it's part of a sacred process. It's not going to the gym that's the key. It's the fact that you made the prior commitment. So then, let's say you made a commitment Monday night to work out Tuesday morning. When you actually show up at the gym Tuesday morning and you're keeping a promise you made to yourself the day before, you've connected Monday when you made the commitment to Tuesday when you kept the commitment. Now, ideally, then on Tuesday night, you make a commitment for Wednesday. And then when you keep that commitment, which means at 10 o'clock Wednesday morning, you enter the gym, then you've connected Tuesday and Wednesday. And if you keep living like this, all the days and get connected to each other. So then you're functioning within a continuum.
Yeah, and we call that the plane of will. And Phil says that the plane of will is actually a place that when people are really keeping these commitments, I've experienced this myself and so have my clients, that they feel like they're living in a certain land, and that land is commitment.
That's right. That's the plane of will is a space you create through your commitments, and it's absolutely real.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of benefits to it. One of which is you actually become more creative.
It's like the creative muses believe you mean it. They know where to go. They know where to find you.
Yeah, I think that's right. They start to believe you mean it.
Another thing that you talked about in this paper you sent me was patience. So can you talk about this? We have such an impatient society, right? You're in the market and you're looking at the lines, which is the shorter line. Inevitably, you run to the shorter line, and then the other line becomes shorter suddenly. So can you talk about this impatience?
You can see that this is one of the major defects in our culture. There isn't enough patience. Now, what does that mean? It's based on how you look at creativity. And the bottom line is we create nothing ourselves, nothing. Everything that's created, whether it's a big thing, you write a book, whether it's how you raise your kid, it's how you prepare a meal, anything, everything, especially if it has any creative aspect to it, cannot be done alone by the singular human being. It has to co-create it with some kind of a larger energy. So creation is really, most of life involves creation, and creation is really co-creation. Now, in the ancient world, they were actually much more hip to this than we are, much more realistic about it. They knew that nothing was created without the help of something higher or some other force, because they realized that they had to accept the fact that those higher forces had a rhythm of their own. Human beings didn't dictate that rhythm. In effect, the gods dictated it. Again, because they were living off the land and they were much more subject to the seasons, etc. They were more willing to be patient. I mean, after all, if you're impatient about what time the sun's going to come up, then I really feel sorry for you.
If you plant a seed and it starts to germinate, but you keep digging it up to see how it's doing.
That's right.
Right.
Now, what is our problem with this? The modern person wants to believe, has the conceit that they can create everything themselves. The modern person doesn't care about a working relationship with higher forces because they don't even believe higher forces exist. So therefore, waiting on the rhythms of the higher forces, the rhythms of the universe, however you want to say it, has no value to the modern person. It's just another waste of time. Though in some crazy sense, the more patient you are, the more they consider you a loser. If like if a kid gets rich, really rich, and he's 32 and he sells his company for $400 million, that kid is held in much higher esteem than if a guy is 62 years old and has worked all his life to build a big company. That took 40 years. That's inferior by definition.
It's interesting because I have a couple clients who made a lot of money at a young age, one in tech stuff and one in the arts, and then blew it, and I'm trying to teach them the value of time and commitment and living on the actual earth, right? Because they had this taste of magic.
Yes. And the taste of magic is very dangerous. It's not only dangerous for the person that maybe had that fleeting success. It's dangerous to everybody else around him. I don't just mean his friends. I mean the business community, the community he lives in, whatever. Because that becomes the standard or the model of success. And what we're trying to do here is define success as the ability to co-create with forces that are bigger than you are. It's not a result. It's a mindset and a process.
Right. So to kind of sum up, we're talking about the concept of submission, commitment, and patience in our relationship to time. We have specific tools that can help you with that, and hopefully we'll do a lot more of these, right, Phil?
If I have time.
But I'm bumped. All right. Bye, Phil.
Goodbye.
I hope you enjoyed today's video chat. If you have questions about the tools, check out my website, jamierosecoaching.com.